The George Floyd Policing Act passed the House in March and was on the way to becoming a major piece of police reform legislation. But the provision to eliminate qualified immunity for police officers may hinder the bill from passing the Senate. Qualified immunity shields individual officers from civil suits for constitutional rights violations. Removing the immunity would open officers up to personal liability for money damages if found guilty. Qualified immunity has become such a hurdle in getting the George Floyd Policing Act through the Senate that policymakers such as Representative Jim Clyburn of South Carolina are willing to remove the bill's provision to get the bill passed with the hopes of getting qualified immunity passed later.
If we don't get qualified immunity now, then we'll come back and try to get it later. But I don't want to see us throw out a good bill because we can't get a perfect bill.
Joining us to discuss is Executive Director for the Center for Constitutional Rights, Vince Warren. Mr. Warren, thank you for being here. So,
thank you so
what
much
do you
for
think
having
the
me.
chances are? Thank you. What do you think the chances are of getting this bill through the Senate if they keep qualified immunity in? The Democrats seem to be thinking that there is no chance left.
Well, you know, it's no surprise that the Republicans are really fighting tooth and nail to make qualified immunity the issue. I mean, I actually, it shocks me, even though I'm not surprised that the Republicans are making such a big deal out of this. But here's what's really going on, and I think it's important for people to know this. Qualified immunity, as you said in the opening, is a shield for police officers. It's a way to keep police officers dismissed from lawsuits when you or I or someone else files lawsuits against them for violating our civil rights. And the only reason that I can think that the Republicans are so hell-bent on saying no to anything that changes qualified immunity is that they like their officers shielded, that they like the idea that there's a way that the law operates so that it is almost automatic that police officers get dismissed out of lawsuits when they are on the hook for their unconstitutional acts. So it's a real problem, and I think it tells us a lot about what we're facing in this country, that this is becoming such a
So
big
explain to our audience, when they see a giant settlement, like in the George Floyd case, you know, tens of millions of dollars, where does that money come from? Because it's not coming from the officers who are responsible.
No, that money is coming from the taxpayers of the city where the killing or the shooting happened. These are lawsuits that are called Monell Claims. It's a lawsuit under the civil rights law that's allowed to be filed against municipalities. So, for example, when the Center for Constitutional Rights filed the Stop and Frisk lawsuit, it was against New York City. When lawsuits are filed against, in the Derek Chauvin killing, it's against the city of Minneapolis. And so these lawsuits—
But they don't have insurance to cover this? It literally comes from the coffers, not from insurance?
Oh, they absolutely have insurance to cover this. And in fact, I think that, you know, the city of Baltimore has paid out tens of millions of dollars. Major cities pay out tens of millions of dollars in these lawsuits. They have insurance to be able to cover it, so that they're anticipating that these types of police killings and beatings and maimings are going to happen, and they're anticipating lawsuits. So there is really no disincentive from a civil litigation point of view for police officers, because qualified immunity shields them from digging into their pockets and paying family members of people that they killed.
And that is big part of the problem here. Clyburn is saying don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but people on the civil rights end of this, or the Black Lives Matter, or the movement for Black Lives end of this, didn't even think this was a good bill. You know, their take was this invests in the structure itself rather than investing in the community. That even with qualified immunity in the bill, it did not go far enough. What do you think about that?
I actually totally agree on that. With all of the respect due to Representative Clyburn, one of the things that we want to stop seeing in this day and age is our lives and our lives being negotiated away for brighter futures with the Republicans. You know, the 1871 Civil Rights Act that gives rise to the ability for black people to even sue police officers to begin with, it's 150 years ago that that law was passed. And here we are now, 150 years later, begging the Republicans to allow us to use it to the full extent of the law. That doesn't make any sense. I'm actually very much in agreement with Black Lives Matter, the movement for Black Lives, because what we should be doing is that we should be investing in our communities and divesting from police departments. We have millions and millions of dollars that we send to police departments every year. And that the problem with some of these reform efforts, including the ones in the bill, is that they're actually not putting more money in the pockets of communities that need help. They're actually putting more money investing in the police officers and the police departments for things like training and other things. Those are very important things. But at the same time, we shouldn't be spending so much money by increasing the power of the police department while we're asking it to behave. What we should be doing is starving the beast and actually building help and support in our communities rather than looking for law enforcement to be an occupying force in our communities.
Your answer sounds like you would be a supporter of the defund the police movement. Is that the case?
Oh, I'm very much a supporter of the defund the police movement, and I'll tell you why. At this point in 400 years of our time as Black people in this country, we have to actually start looking at what we are trying to build and trying to gather the resources to be able to build it. And we shouldn't be investing in what end up being occupying forces in our communities. Look, you wrote about the stop and frisk case in the litigation that we tried. You know, and that we won, that you know what it is like to be Black and brown in New York City with the NYPD. The answer to that cannot possibly be, let's give them more money so that they'll treat us better. That's not the way that it works with respect to government. The best way to hold the police accountable is to be able to shrink their mandate and to shrink their ability to use assault weapons, to use tanks, to use water cannons, to drive police cars through our protests. What they should be doing is they should be helping to provide services to people that are in crisis. The mental health services in our communities are terrible. Drug treatment in our community is terrible. Why on earth would we be giving millions and millions of dollars to police us because we don't have those resources? Why wouldn't we be investing in those resources to begin with?
Vince Warren, thank you so much for joining us tonight.